Caddis Maximus here, this time with a review of the GM Power Torque from O'Reilly's. This would be the metric and standard 7-piece Deepwell 3/8 inch impact swivel socket set. These are pretty interesting sockets. They don't actually look all that nice, to tell you the truth, but I needed to buy a set for the 14mm for a particular situation, and it did work. But when I wasn't particularly pleased when I was looking at these, they just happened to be the only place that had Deepwell swivels in stock, and it was a situation where I needed these Deepwell swivels and was in the next town over, didn't have access to my normal tools, or didn't actually bring this particular setup, didn't think I would need it. And they offered to pay for half of it, just to go down to the auto store and pick some up. So, looked around online. O'Reilly's was the only place that had them. Let's take a closer look at these. They come on some really cheesy, totally insufficient socket strips. They're almost pointless, but it keeps them from rolling around. But they'll, if you hold the socket strip upside down, they'll just all fall off. It's pretty cheesy. They don't have, I'll take one off to do a much closer look. I just wanted to show that they do some of the cheaper stuff where you can see this 14mm has, if we can get a better look, really extra thick walls compared to the other sockets, just because the cheaper sockets will use the same size billets on a couple different size sockets and just broach one small and one large. Let's take this 14 off. They just basically fall off. So this was what was disappointing. It's not an industrial finish. It's like they're powder coated or painted, which is interesting because you'd think the whole painting process would actually be a little more expensive than an industrial finish, but I'm not exactly sure. I didn't know how these were going to hold up. They're a little bit unique in the fact that versus standard impact swivel joints, they use a hex system here. And let's see if we can get that. Let me zoom in a little bit on that. There we go. And so this is how they work. They have this odd hex system, and it's locked in with a snap ring, and the corners of the hex actually really wear hard against that snap ring. I'm sure it seems to deliver the torque just fine. I just wonder about long-term wear, whether that ring will grind out and the socket will fall apart, or this hex will end up wearing down to the point where it fails. And what I mean is we compare it to a standard swivel socket. Their CV joint is just a slot and a big piece an anvil and a heavy-duty pin that goes through in a socket, and that's what retains it all. They usually have a spring in the back so that they have a little bit of tension so they're not flopping around. Another thing I noticed about these GM Power Torques is you would expect them to actually be a little more compact than a 3/8 inch impact socket with impact swivel, but if we look, and these are exactly the same height here, and because they're black, I'm having trouble with lighting, even though there's 5,000 lumens. So that's what I thought was interesting, is with a normal impact swivel and a standard 3/8 impact Deepwell socket, these things aren't any shorter, so that kind of takes away any advantage that they might have, besides simply just being integrated into a single socket unit. But as far as buying them, it's real hard to justify because they aren't even more compact than the standard Deepwells, and you're going to be obviously much better off with a interchangeable Deepwell socket set and an interchangeable swivel. So generally I wouldn't recommend these because you're going to need to end up with these kind of normal sockets and a swivel anyway, and then these just become pointless. So really can't recommend buying them unless they're really cheap and on sale and you're a tool collector or you're in a weird situation like I was, where you had to pick some up. As far as how they seem to have worked, with this 14mm, I hit this with a pretty big, it was actually using a reducer on a 1/2-inch drive impact wrench, a DeWalt brushless. And at least I was satisfied on that. I was expecting the drive to get kind of rounded out. I took out several real stubborn, that's the word I'm looking for, very stubborn exhaust fasteners. And you can see the painted surface just got totally blasted off on the inside of the socket immediately. But it actually held up pretty well. I was really surprised. And here's the drive end. This removed about 10 fasteners, and that's just what happens on the drive end to impact sockets. They really get beat up real fast. So it definitely performed as expected. I was pretty happy, and I just hit them with, full force. I just needed to get out the fasteners, and I figure if they broke, we'd just go back to O'Reilly's and return them and finish the project later. But it actually came through, so I can say that. Otherwise, that's about all I can say. They use a different kind of design that's unique. I think there's some other manufacturers that use this, but I'm not so sure about the long-term longevity of the joint design, and the fact that they're really kind of funky and excessively redundant. So I even suspect that these won't be on the shelves at O'Reilly for too much more time, just because there's no real point to them. When anybody who gets starts getting impact tools will, of course, get a deep well socket set and a universal joint, which is the same size. So that's it for this review. I really appreciate you all watching. Please subscribe. Catus Maximus out.